Welcome back to a very special episode of the World Class Cast. This is Mike. I'm sitting here with Lance, and today I just watched The Iron Claw. Lance saw it a couple of days ago, and we're here to give a review and our thoughts on The Iron Claw. If you are listening on YouTube and not on our Patreon, we have covered from late 82 all the way through 88 of World Class Championship Wrestling on our Patreon page. Lance Peterson is a resident expert. He grew up in Dallas. He's from here. And he lived and breathed this promotion as a young man. And again, if you're listening to us for the first time, we've covered this promotion in depth, episode by episode, from late 82 all the way through October of 88. And I grew up watching World Class. For our Patreon members out there, thank you for tuning in. Lance, you're the expert, man. There's not a thing you don't know about World Class. And I have been dying to see this movie. You tried to get me to come see it with you because you had an early pass, but I couldn't make it that night. Do you want to say? Let me throw it to you. Let's throw it to you. I want you to say anything you want to say before we get into all of the great details of it and the things that we witnessed in this movie, inspired and based on the story of the Von Erichs.
Hey, Mike, it's a fine movie. Really good. People that don't know anything about this story, it's just it's a tearjerker, and it's kind of tragedy after tragedy, kind of compressed. In the real life, this was spread out, and today we're going to hit some of the details. I'm going to you could say I'm picking it apart. I'm not doing it in a negative way. I'm known for doing the details. People that have seen my Twitter account know that I put the details out there. It's what I'm all about. I didn't grow up knowing what was going on behind the scenes in their real life, and neither did this writer. He's from the UK. It looks like he took a lot of social media. He took a few newsletters. He took a few shoot interviews and put this together. I think a lot of people could have written the same story, honestly, and a few of the quotes in the movie, I think, show, where he got his sources from. The actors, we're going to get into the specific actors who are just, fantastic in their roles, doing the best they can, things like that. I'm ready to get rolling, Mike. I know you're excited. I couldn't wait for you to see it. We've covered all this World Class in 5 years. Let's just get rolling on it.
I'm almost at a loss for where to start because there's so much to talk about. I guess the main thing that I'd want to say is, as hardcore wrestling fans as we are, and we've been to our whole lives. I grew up on Mid-South, you on World Class, but I got World Class too, where I'm from in South Louisiana. You told me something after you saw it, and it was the only thing you told me because you didn't want to spoil anything for me. And again, I don't want to focus on historical inaccuracies in the movie, but the one thing that I will say that they got down, they got a good bit of stuff down, but one thing that hit me, you said it, was like the whole family and brotherhood thing, brothers. That really resonates and comes through in the film, like the love that they had for each other. And I guess most brothers. I don't have any brothers, so let me say that. I guess most brothers are like that. But it really, that's the one thing, if I want to start anywhere before we start going through the different characters, that you get a sense from, man, they loved each other. They fought, because they're brothers, but they also had this love and respect for each other. And it was very interesting the way the director kind of showed that and portrayed it throughout the movie, in an instance where, Kevin, quote unquote, has the shot at the world title. They kind of lead you to believe that the NWA may not have liked the way that worked out. David was going to get his shot. Kevin's like, kind of feels almost like he should have got it, but he's not mad, but he's kind of upset, but he's happy for his brother David. It was a real brother dynamic, like a real loving brother dynamic that they portrayed. And you told me that before. You didn't tell me why you felt that way, but I really felt going into it, as I watched it, they nailed the importance of family and brotherhood between those brothers that were in the movie.
it was the theme for all the years of World Class was family. I've talked
Yeah.
about it on our shows on and on. Family, family. Even the Freebirds called themselves family. Family versus family was the whole dynamic, And even when Fritz wasn't featured on TV, would come in maybe every once a year, 6 months or something, and he was still referred to, they still referenced Fritz and the family. And I guess it was the top notch thing that was captured because those boys lived on all that property. They were so close in age that this bond was tremendous. It comes across. There's a tag team match in the middle of '82, and you can find it on YouTube, or I think it's on the network of Reunion, where Kevin and David win these tag belts, and you see how excited truly they are, and you see Kevin how happy he is to be with David. Sometimes it's almost like David was the older brother of Kevin when in all of this. It really was, but they were so tight, just so tight, and it was true how devastated Kevin was at David's death, and then how things just kept going worse and worse. And I have a lot of notes in there about the family. We're just gonna, get into it. Let's get into the start, Mike. They started with that black and white scene of Fritz wrestling and everything, and that was great to kind of get a background on him. That's the only time he's really, shown, getting at it. And they go outside, and there's Doris and the boys waiting on him, and they got a travel trailer there. And this is what's funny is they were in Buffalo in that scene, supposedly, as far as in real life. They were going to go down to Corpus Christi, and Fritz was going to own a bait shop, and they only stopped in Dallas because, they had roots here, especially Doris and everything right here in Dallas proper. And somehow, they stopped and they stayed, with Ed McLemore running the Sportatorium, promoting, got in with him. And, they never made it down to Corpus Christi, which is pretty funny and stuff. From there, Mike, I if you want to go to anything right there, I want to talk about the characters and my favorite things in the movie. Lily James played Pam, and I'm not sure that that's exactly how Pam was. There was a really bubbly personality, and Pam is actually, I believe she's a pretty calm spirit, just a wonderful lady, a good sense of humor on social media, and but I thought Lily James portrayed her just so well. I really like that. And then what I'm seeing on social media is everybody's agreeing about the guy who played Mike, this Stanley Simmons, I believe, how fantastic he was. We're going to get into that in a minute about how he played Mike, but he had a couple of good lines in it, and I just fantastic.
So, do you want to go character by character?
Yeah, let's go character first. Let's talk characters. Go ahead.
I start with Zac Efron as Kevin Von Erich. Lance, the only thing they got wrong in terms of the character looks to me was I could have seen Zac as Kerry, but I realized why Zac was Kevin, because once you get past kind of how bulky he is, because Kevin was ripped, but I just didn't feel like he was ever kind of looked that extremely bulky. Zac Efron was great as Kevin Von Erich. I thought he was phenomenal. I'm like just the movements in the ring. Like you can never mimic another wrestler unless you're. Some wrestlers you can because their movements are so pronounced, and everybody kind of tries to do what Ric Flair does and things like that as far as like how he would strut or do the face bump, but. There was so many things that Zac did where it almost like he looked like the way Kevin kind of would walk around the ring and hold his arms out. He really looked, and I don't know, man. I just was like, this dude is really mimicking Kevin. Even, I knew he didn't talk just like him, but it just kind of seemed like sometimes his facial expressions, some of the times we would see Kevin in World Class and all the promos we've reviewed that he did. I just really thought Zac Efron did a fantastic job of portraying Kevin Von Erich. I thought he was phenomenal. And he's a good actor. I've never been like, oh my God, Zac Efron's the greatest actor in the world. But in this movie, he does a fantastic job, in my opinion, of playing Kevin Von Erich.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're getting to this right away because this is the number one thing in the movie is people talking about the looks, the physiques. It is hard to get past the fact of how good Zac Efron's physique was compared to everybody else in the movie. Come on. I mean, his veins, he's vascular. I mean, and he's pretty short guy, but they made him look so gigantic. And the other guys just didn't have that tan while he's golden and brown. And we know what Kerry looked like. We know Kerry tan. We know Kerry, just as a force, a rock star in professional wrestling. That was hard to get over. But man, I tell you, you're right. Zac play in and out of the ring was fantastic. I tell you, Kevin's son Marshall can do a lot of the movements that Kevin does. He does that. I've seen him a lot, and he will do those. But he looked good in there. And I just to jump in, they what they did is they actually did these matches as I understand it. They would do full length matches, one take live matches in front of a studio audience. And this where they held it was a converted furniture store and stuff. But the scenes of wrestling were relatively short. As far as as Kevin gets, the news just gets getting worse and worse and worse. You really felt Zac Efron playing it as somebody who's going through it. And he really connected with that. Again, hard to get over the physique. I just, that's really hard that he was so, I mean, maybe if he wasn't so tan, I don't know. Kevin was never that tan, but I mean, he just really stuck out above and beyond on another level than the other guys.
I agree. I think it was partially the tan because like Jeremy Allen White was not tan playing Kerry Von Erich, and he didn't have Kerry's physique like that we were so used to watching World Class when we were younger. And even now that we've done, 125 reviews on all those episodes that we reviewed on our Patreon. So I agree. It kind of was a situation where it's the one, take out the way they fast forwarded the timeline of things and things were out of place. Take out those things that, as hardcore wrestling fans like you and I that know the history of this territory and World Class and the Von Erichs, you can't, it's just too glaring for you to just not even realize it because we know the history. Outside of that though, and outside of Zac just looking great, I could have seen him playing Kerry. But the thing is, as I say that, I'm saying that because of the physique. As his mannerisms and his actual acting, he did a phenomenal job playing Kevin. And there's just no other way to put how good he was. Even when he's told, it's like that scene I was talking about where, he has the match with Harley, and it's led to believe that it went okay, but it didn't go great. And David comes in and saves him, and he cuts this promo, and Fritz is, saying how great David did during the promo in the ring. And, Zac Efron as Kevin Von Erich is like, Dave, you should have let me talk, because these things weren't scripted like they are now. He's like, you should have let me talk. And David's like, well, Kev, I kind of give you a chance. And you could see Kevin's mad, but it's his brother. So he's like, he's mad, but he didn't let it fester. And I don't know. I don't know Kevin Von Erich personally. You've had conversations with him. It just feels like that was a real moment. And that's what I meant by him playing that part. Like he was mad, but he tells his brother, ultimately, he's like, it's all right, Dave. It's okay. He let it just simmer, but he didn't let it didn't erupt. He did his top didn't blow over that moment. And that might be my take. You might disagree, but that was just for me how I felt in that moment.
Well, this is one of those scenes that's just made up.
Right.
I know the history. I know that, Kevin was wrestling. David then came into the scene. In there, they really made Kevin sound like he couldn't do interviews. I really didn't understand that because Kevin did interviews. He did them his way, but that stumbling stuff, that just didn't, I didn't see that back in the day. Of course, David was on another level. And the idea that David went to Japan for basically they act like it was the first time he went to Japan when he died. Both David and Kevin had been to Japan. Both David and
Right.
Kevin had been to St. Louis and everywhere else. David, Georgia and Florida. David had both of them had gone over there. Had main events on Georgia and in Florida. Kevin would go over there when David was there a little bit, just a couple of times. Really, it was more when they were in Georgia, but they it just we look at this with such a fine tooth comb through the years and stuff. So I'm trying to relax on certain things. Jeremy Allen White, let's talk about him a second. The thing about Jeremy having Kerry in this movie, who everybody, it's hard to say Kerry wasn't the favorite of all of them. It comes out on social media. People like to see it because, Kevin is on social media or was. So people were, careful to say stuff. But you could tell, everybody on social media, it was Kerry this, Kerry that, the phenomenon, the rock star. And then he's not even in the first 30 minutes of the movie. He's supposed to be off at Houston training for the Olympics, on their track team. And then they have the boycott. And he comes home, and Fritz asks him to wrestle. Well, of course, Kerry had already done some wrestling in '78, gone off to Houston, and then comes back. And I don't even know how long he was actually at Houston. I think the trials, he wasn't even going to the trials. His throws were not, in modern times, we've talked to people about the discus people at the time, and he wasn't a top guy in the world or in the United States. He wasn't. So it gave them that great thing that they boycotted the Olympics where he would have gone. I mean, it was a perfect story. So he comes in the movie, but I thought they kind of played him one-dimensional. He was just kind of quiet, whatever his dad said. And that may be the way he is, but we didn't get a chance to see, Kerry. Kerry was maybe they could have had one scene where he was taking pictures to show his love of photography or get to know the real guy. They, they didn't say dumb jock, but they just played him so one-dimensional. And, that was the only thing I had with him. I was okay. By the way, I don't want to take away the fact that guy worked really hard to get his body in that kind of shape. If you see pictures with their shirts off, you can see the cut in the chest and how this guy looks. And it's funny because I've seen pictures of the guy from 10 years ago that, and how he's changed through the years. And he did a little chubby face back in the day, it looks like. But he's, out in Hollywood, and you get in shape for these movies and stuff. And this one, he did put a lot of work in to look that good. He's just not Zac Efron.
Yeah, I don't think he looks bad. It's just when you know what Kevin Von Erich looked like, and when you know what Kerry Von Erich looked like, and when you watch it growing up, you realize, wait, he's they kind of mixed these up because Jeremy Allen White was not as big as Kerry. Then again, I thought he did a good job acting. I thought he did a good job playing Kerry. I just don't know if throughout the movie, if there was any for me, with Zac Efron, it felt like there was a little bit more character development, and they showed
absolutely.
They showed more of Kevin, and that might be because, it's because Kevin is the one who's still living of all the brothers. He couldn't play Kerry. Right. He couldn't play Kerry. Kerry's gonna die in it, and this is Kevin's movie. It really is the Kevin kind
movie.
of. Yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it too. Lance, anything more on Jeremy Allen White? Because I do.
No, we'll get into a couple of. We'll get into the plot in a minute, but he was fine playing. I think he played exactly as how they wrote it.
Harris Dickinson, who played David Von Erich, I wasn't sure about this going into the movie, but seeing the movie and having watched David Von Erich when I was younger, I thought this guy was damn good as David Von Erich. What did you think?
I can't wait to see it again for him. Again, there's a lot going on in that movie theater, and I didn't have, I'm big on having my yellow tablets when I watch these, the legal pads when I watch these, and I wish I had it there to pause. They weren't pausing the movie for me to take notes. He was fantastic, as close as he could. Of course, David had even more fire, knew how to do it, was such a natural, so well liked by the legends. This guy. he's actually British, has an accent and everything, and it did this. He had the wardrobe down. They could have showed more of him being the cowboy and stuff like that. He was wearing a cowboy hat to influence it. A lot of it, because we had to keep going tragedy to tragedy, the character development wasn't there. But they
Right.
did capture the David Kevin connection. And again, I was really happy with that. He was fantastic. I took a picture of him at the premiere. Nobody even knew who he was when he walked by, and I took a picture. And it's amazing because he's kind of a string bean. He's really thin, but those hair extensions, the hat, he was wearing like a football jersey with a jacket over it or something. It thickened him up and stuff.
And well, the thing is, like when I think about David Von Erich during that era, I always looked at him as the tall, thin Von Erich, though, when I was growing up watching them. So it didn't, like his physique, I'm not going to say it was exactly like David's, but he kind of reminded me of David. Like when I he did a good job of acting. Like he really, I don't know, he seemed like there was that one promo that he cut. Maybe it was more than one in the movie, but and it's inaccurate because he delivers the line that Kevin delivered in the ring. This is a war between decency and filth, or I think they actually got it backwards in the movie, filth and decency. Kevin actually said that in the ring against the Freebirds, but they portrayed it as David saying it in that promo. But the thing that, if you don't concentrate on that and you don't know that, to me, he kind of reminded me of David Von Erich delivering a promo when he was talking. And I really thought, like, man, this guy is reminding me of David Von Erich right now. Like, you're never going to get it 100% because you're not that person. You're an actor. But I really thought he kind of sounded like him a little and did a really good job of playing the role of David Von Erich. And, that's what you're going for in a movie. So, duh, Mike, right? But I just really thought he did a good job. So, kudos to him and what he did in the movie. I thought it was great.
Are there little things that they changed because they had to? I mean, changing that filth versus decency because it's a dramatization of the real thing, and WWF owns the real tapes. I just don't understand why you changed that, but they did. With David delivering it in more of a in that interview setting rather than right before that 6-man that is, people know that quote. That are fans, I've put it out there on Twitter a billion years, things like that. It was such a big thing in that match. It seemed so cool, so memorable. Again, that was right after when that aired. It was filmed August 12th, 1983. And that was right when syndication had gone nuts and stuff. And during our shows that we've done the last 5 years, I've talked to Mike about the syndication and what that meant for this. And we're going to talk about syndication when it comes to the plot of this movie in a minute. But that's decency versus filth. I'm surprised he used a lot of quotes, the writer did, of the Von Erichs through the years. But to throw that in such a weird way, I was kind of shocked.
Yeah, it was weird the way it was delivered. And again, if you're not a hardcore viewer and know the story, you might have thought that was the way the actual interview actually went down. When in reality, it was like Lance said, they were in the ring. Kevin was the one on the mic, and Kevin quotes the line, this isn't about, I forget if it was good versus bad. If he said it like that, this is a war with decency versus filth.
Yeah, Georgia. It was not nuts. A war between Georgia, Texas, and Georgia. It's a war between filth, decency, and filth. That's right. What he says, and we're making a bigger deal than it. But it's still, it's a memorable damn thing and stuff. But let's keep rolling, man.
Yeah. So those are the well, no, we still got Mike. Because you had kind of talked about Mike. So Stanley, was it Simmons played Mike?
Yeah, and man, was he fantastic. Now, some of that's just got to be made up. We know that the common thing is Mike liked music. Well, we don't know really. I've never seen anything of Mike really playing music. Certainly not a garage band. Certainly not singing. Unfortunately, his interviews through the years, he's kind of marble mouthed on the interviews. Now, I've defended Mike, and we've watched all the tapes. And Mike never really had a real problem in the ring. Right near the very end, we watched a specific episode where he did look lost in a match, but otherwise all Mike did was improve the whole time, and then got the toxic shock syndrome, and that set him back. He did have the fever. He did come back frail. I still think he recovered a lot more than they say. I think they used in real life, they used the Mike's sickness to excuse some of why he was so thin, or why he didn't sound what never got smooth on the mic. In the movie, they make it as if right after this he's he's really more damaged than he was. I just don't see that, because Mike did come back, and Mike did have matches and everything. He came back July 4th of 86, and he committed suicide in April of 87. So there were matches in there and stuff. But again, he after he had the toxic shock syndrome, and I think his personality did change in certain ways, and he actually rolled a car 3 times. It's one of the tragedies that is not in the movie. He actually, rolled a car a few times after he got out of the hospital. He got in trouble for kicking somebody at the hospital too, a medical person. I don't know if it was the nurse or the doctor. He kicked somebody. So his mood was just changed. But, he came back and wrestled and was, fair. He certainly wasn't what he was, but, the movie really makes him seem more damaged. And, of course, they cram it together where, he commits suicide pretty quick.
Yeah, they progressed that much quicker than what actually happened. As you said, he wrestled, he got the, hurt shoulder, got the toxic shock. He needed time to recover. He did recover. He eventually does come back. He is still frail, but when he comes back, he's not. I've said this before. If you've heard me on our Patreon, I think Mike gets a bad rap in terms of how people think his career went. He's not as bad as some people will portray him. At the same time, he wasn't as advanced as his brothers were in terms of in the ring, but it's because we saw him as a true rookie, whereas many people didn't see Kevin and Kerry and David as true rookies. So I think, as I've said many a times, I think Mike gets a bad rap, but they did progress that timeline real quickly. I mean, they made it seem like, he gets out the hospital and it's like, just a few weeks, month later, he's, suicide. And that's kind of not how it happened. But again, they were telling a story. It's a movie. You only got so much time. If you made a mini series out of this, it would have been a whole lot different than the movie. How fast they progress.
Exactly right. Because he really did, he did go downhill. They went to it real quick. He went to Israel on that late August 85 tour. He comes back and he actually does have matches and has that shoulder surgery scheduled. There's a beat down by Gino and Chris that the syndicated, we always talk about the syndicated shows, the Channel 39, the Bill Mercer show versus the Saturday night show with Mark Lawrence. Mike actually takes a beating from Chris Adams and Gino to get him for shoulder surgery. But that's never mentioned on Channel 39 because he gets sick. And so, they don't put the heat on Gino and Chris for him going, having the problem. What he does is he has that shoulder surgery. He goes home and then he develops the toxic shock, the infection. And, we've talked before, the doctor, there was a doctor who did this shoulder surgery that the Von Erichs, did, have problems, litigation and stuff against. I think it's settled. And then there was the doctor who, Dr. Sucker was his infectious disease doctor that saved his life. It was big time, in charge of infectious diseases at Baylor Hospital. He just retired a few years ago. And you would see him after this, you'd see him on different episodes of World Class sitting at the front row with his family at the Sportatorium or at Reunion Arena. And so sometimes Bill Mercer would get that wrong on the show. He would mention that Bill Sucker was the surgeon. Well, he certainly was not the surgeon because Von Erichs were not pleased the fact that Mike had developed this infection, and that who's to know whose fault that really was. An infection is going to happen with a major surgery. And then Mike does come back as I said, July 4th of 86. So he was out just less than a year, and that was pretty quick. If you see him at the Cotton Bowl in October of '85, and he's riding in that little Porsche, and they're parading him out there, he was pretty thin. But again, I've always defended that because the fans really did want to see him, and they did. The people love this family, and they wanted to see Mike, and I really don't have a problem with them parading him out there. Yes, maybe he came back soon, maybe he shouldn't have come back at all, and but hey, they might have pegged Fritz right in this movie.
Boy, okay, so that's the next thing. Holt McElhaney, I think is how you pronounce his name. Now, Lance, you and I don't know Fritz Von Erich, never met him, obviously. But we've heard tons of stories about him from other talent in world class in various shoot interviews where we've heard a lot about Fritz. And I just need to say, this dude played that role so well. Like, he probably is outside of Zac Efron as Kevin, in terms of a person who I could be fooled in thinking I am watching the real Fritz Von Erich. I at times listen to that man talk, and having heard Fritz on various interviews on World Class and seeing a few TV shows where Fritz did various interviews. I think he was on Entertainment Tonight at one point or something. I can't remember. You can correct me because you're the real expert on World Class. Having lived it and breathed it. I'm trying to remember when I heard him on an interview many, many years ago. This man was exceptional playing Fritz. And the one thing I want to get into as I ask you what you think of it, I want to get into what we've talked about before this movie, where one of the worries of Kevin as being the only living son left, or brother, is do you think it portrayed how mean he was? Because that was Kevin's big worry about his father. And I have something else to say. I have one thing I want to add after you talk about how you think Fritz was portrayed in this movie, because I think he was portrayed very well and accurately based on what I have known and been told. And I also think this dude played that role so damn well. He was phenomenal.
He was tremendous. He had it down. He fit what everybody says about Fritz. And I went back and forth, more leaning towards blaming Fritz most growing up, since all the tragedies. I've really, it was the common thing to do. And then I start thinking, well, his boys were older, and maybe this was just this Texas redneck who wanted his boys to go into the successful family business. What other choices did they have? They weren't going into pro sports. Why not go push them into the successful family business? Well, it took it up a notch. It was, the way it was forced. There was a reference in there that they didn't specific. Here's what it is. Kevin and David are supposedly at Kevin's wedding, and David's throwing up in the toilet, and he's throwing up blood, and they're sitting there in the stall talking, and they make a reference to the fact that, well, you don't, maybe you shouldn't go, and they kind of laugh it off as if if you don't catch on, the fact is, no way was Fritz going to let him not go to Japan. He's going to go whatever Dad said. He ruled not with an iron fist but an iron claw. That's the whole movie right there. Maybe it's the Fritz story, right? That could have been.
Yeah.
He was rough and tough in it, just like all the stereotypes are, and I gotta say, they probably pegged him pretty good from just the amount of people that have made comments about him, about Fritz and how he was, not just the newsletter writers of the day, people that were around him. I've heard Mercer interviewed about Fritz, and the way he was domineering, and so I guess he pegged him perfect.
So the thing going into this that I kept thinking about when I first saw Fritz in this movie and the portrayal of him, I kept thinking about what I heard that Kevin said was like, it seemed like he was really worried about how his father, who's deceased and been deceased for many years now, was going to be portrayed because of how mean he was. But as I say that, so as I'm watching it, I don't think they overdid it in terms of the meanness. And here's why I say that, Lance. I remember hearing a story, and I don't know if it was Kevin who told the story or someone else, and it may have been Kevin, now I'm thinking about it. So Kevin is in this story, Kevin is the only brother still alive. David had already died. Kerry, suicide. Mike, suicide. And I believe Chris had committed suicide by this point too. Chris, who's not even in the movie. I'll let you know. I'm sure you're going to talk about that later. Chris Von Erich. So Kevin says in his shoot interview, or maybe it was Mercer, I don't remember, but he said he was talking to his dad and they were kind of having a really heated argument. And his dad told him, you know, you don't have the heart to do it. Talking about committing suicide. So my point of reference to how mean Fritz is, as the extreme point, is that. Because I'm a father of two. You're a father. I would never even think to telling one of my kids who are young teenagers, not young, but one of them's 18, the other one's 15. I would never have the heart to tell them, even in their 20s, you know, one of your siblings killed themselves. You ain't got the heart to do it. I ain't got to worry about you doing it. That is a twisted thing to tell your child. So when I think of when I think of the things that you could say and how you could be mean to your children, that is a twisted, mental, psychopathic thing to say. You are just a ornery old POS if you tell that to your children. So I'm waiting in the movie. I'm like, are they going to air that quote unquote scene? Not really a scene, because that actually, from what I understand, was a real conversation, according to Kevin Von Erich. And I'm like, are they going to portray that in the movie? And the reason I bring that up specifically too is because Kevin is the one who has said he didn't want his dad portrayed so bad. But I'm like, Kevin, you already told that story, dude. I don't know if they could make anything worse than that. So my perspective going in was, I know I've heard that story that Fritz told Kevin, you know, you don't have the heart to do it. Like, I'm here. I know that. Like, how bad can they portray this man? Is it going to be that? They didn't go there in the movie with that you don't have the heart to do it to Kevin Von Erich, from Fritz to him. So because of that, I'm like, they portrayed him as a mean, hard ass of an old man who was hard on his boys. But to me, they didn't go over the top. Do you agree there or disagree? And what are your thoughts?
They took it right to I think they got their point across, that tough love, and that the only thing that mattered were the boys' accomplishments in sports, in athletics. That's all that mattered. It didn't matter anything else, nothing mattered except the sports accomplishments and getting that belt that they wouldn't give Fritz. That was, the theme of it, it really was. And so, he pegged it on the money. And no, I do know that Kevin has said exactly what you know about that. It showed him out there playing football with the boys, but still being rough, and that is kind of what I always understood. He did things with the boys, but gruff as hell. And that's what they knew growing up. They didn't know any other world and stuff. And they were their own best friends. Brian Adias was a close friend, in school with Kerry and things like that. But they were them. I believe they were pretty tight just with themselves at those ages and stuff. That's what they knew. That's the life they knew, and so that's how they played it.
Yeah, it just so. To go back to Kevin's initial thought of, he was worried about how his dad would be portrayed. They can't top the story he told about his own dad telling him about his dad telling him you don't have the heart to kill yourself. So
Yeah, he
in
said
that
those things
sense,
in the '90s, you know, in those
right?
shoot interviews in the late
Yeah.
'90s, and now we're 23 years later, and Kevin's, you know, older and older, 66 years old or so, something like that now. Um, yeah, and so he said those things, and he probably wants to take some of it back because those things were that favoritism line. Kevin said that about being a favorite. We
Yep.
didn't hear Fritz say that. We, you know, we weren't in the house with him when he said that or anything like that. But you know, I guess some families do know when there's favoritism. But you know, this movie was written off that quote of the favoritism.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
So Kevin
nobody.
did say it. So Kevin did say it, and you know, if you look at Wikipedia on Iron Claw, it says Kevin, you know, gave a vote of confidence to the movie or was okay with how his dad was portrayed. I don't know if that's true on Wikipedia that he has said that. I know that I believe that they tried to the Von Erichs quotes about the movie were were talking about the fact of how well Chavo trained him to wrestle because the
Hmm.
rest of it is fantasy and stuff. You
Yeah.
know, we weren't there, or they just took pictures and wrote this movie. Let's keep rolling, man.
By the way, shout out to Chavo and my good friend Luke Hawks, who was also involved with the movie. James Beard as well. I consider him a friend. He's been on BTT over the years. Luke has as well. Chavo's never been on the show. I'd be remiss. I know we're going to get to this further, but my friend Devin I can't say Devin's last name. Devin Imbrugliaglo, I think is how you say it. He was Buddy Roberts. So, and he was on the show. If you're listening to this on YouTube and have never listened to Book in the Territory before, you can hear my interview with Devin, who played the role of Buddy Roberts. Was on BTT about a month and a half ago, talking about the movie and his role and working with Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White and all those guys. And Devin's been a friend of mine for many years, so he was actually in the movie. It's one of the folks who worked with Chavo and the rest in terms of the being during the wrestling scenes and whatnot. So
Let
okay,
me just jump in. All I've you know, as somebody who kind of sees it all about this movie, I'm getting all the comments, everything. People love the casting of the birds, and so that was just fantastic. They looked great, the visual of them, and you know, the scenes looked good. The wrestling was, you know, pretty. It wasn't, the movie wasn't set for, you know, big wrestling matches. You know, it was quick, but as
clips.
far as how they looked and stuff, and you know, some of the moves that they did show in the movie, it just, you know, was fantastic. And so those guys, man, they deserve a round of applause for.
Yeah, shout out to the guys playing the Freebirds, man. Devin, God, who was Michael Hayes, Brady Pierce, and I forget. Oh God, what was his name? That was Terry Gordy. I forget his name, but Brady Pierce, who I've seen work at Wildcat Sports and Entertainment numerous times, along with Devin. Great job as a Freebirds. I wanted to point that out. They didn't have any speaking parts, but I really enjoyed them as a Freebirds. So okay, Lance, we've gone through Kevin, Kerry, David, Mike, Fritz. You talked about Lily, Pam Atkinson, Kevin's wife. I guess the only person we didn't talk about was Doris Von Erich, played by Maura Tierney.
Yeah.
Thoughts on her?
You know, that's hard to judge. You
It
know,
is.
you're going by the fantasy that this lady let things go. Fritz was so domineering; she had nothing. She's just this woman who she let Fritz raised those boys, and she didn't give a damn, or not didn't give a damn, but she had no. It was his choice, and she was okay with it all the way through to a point. So you know, her whole thing. That's just fantasy. We don't know. Supposedly, she was, you know, got out there and helped Kerry win the discus, and she'd go shag disc for him, and it was whole family effort, you know, trying to get Kerry, you know, better and better at discus and stuff like that. Um, you know, the fact that here's the deal. Y'all know that Texas Stadium, Kerry wins the belt, and they, you know, everybody celebrates in the ring. He starts to head back to the locker room. He hugs his mom and Fritz right
Right.
there before he goes up. And here in the movie, she's
She's
sitting at the
watching the TV.
house, if I'm thinking right, Mike's sitting there with her in the house, and we know that that's not how it was. Mike was on the damn card, and I believe Mike was right there in that scene.
Wait, no, no,
But
no. Hold on. I took no, Lance. Here's how I took that scene. Doris is on the sitting there watching the match as if it's televised live. That wasn't Mike behind her because he faded. That was David. That was an image of David who had died. So
is that right? Okay.
That's how I took it because it was a blurry. He was blurred out. He wasn't like clear. So I didn't think that was Mike sitting on the steps watching it as Kerry won the belt. I took that as they were trying to portray David looking down from heaven, seeing his brother win the NWA World Heavyweight title. I didn't think that was Mike. I thought that was David on the steps because
Maybe
they faded him away.
The movie was moving and they weren't pausing for me.
Right.
But the fact is, she was at those Texas stadiums. A lot of them were on Mother's Day, and the boys would come out and give her flowers before the show started in front of the fans. So she was right there, as far as her sitting in a cold, dark house watching it as if it's live, it's total horseshit.
Yeah. So that's the type of stuff that I'm glad you said that because I don't want to get like one of the things I didn't want to do in this review is you and I could do a show for 3 hours long about what they got historically inaccurate and that's what I think people like me and you who know the history would tend to do. Like we'll watch it and kind of I don't say me and you are not going to do it. There's a segment of the wrestling audience who it will just frustrate them and they'll hate it because of that. And that's fine. If you don't like it because of that, it's a free country. Go be mad that it's not historically accurate. There is so many moments like that one in the movie that we could point to, but I'm not going to. But you made a good point, Lance. It was moving so quick. You thought that was Mike. And I'm like, no, that's David. He was kind of looking down from heaven in that moment. So anyway, who knows who's right? Who knows who's wrong here? But I'm glad you pointed it out because that part is not true. Like Mike was there. Doris was there. They were all there to celebrate Kerry winning the NWA World Heavyweight title. That moment, that was one of those moments where I knew this is not true, obviously. I mean, it's true he won the belt, but this is not how it played out because I've seen the footage a million times. Both of us have. We reviewed it before. But it's part of the movie. It's part of the story, how they wanted to tell that story. And you know what? That's Hollywood. That's how it's done. These movies based and inspired on true stories like this one, they kind of aren't historical masterpieces in terms of timelines. We would, like I said, we could spend 2 hours on that, but it wouldn't make sense. So good point. And I actually didn't mind the way they did it because, again, I thought it was David sitting there looking down from quote unquote heaven or from above.
Because I'm such a historian of their careers, I can't help but do it because, when people say, a rare time Kevin wore boots in a match or something like that when we were on Twitter, and I'm like, he wrestled 6 years with boots on before he ever took them off. I'm that kind of stickler. So, I'm not putting it down because they had to jam it all together. But I am that guy. Looking at every little thing and stuff. Hey, Mike, I'm just going to throw this in right quick. Where the early scene in the movie where they are wrestling at the sportatorium, there's a fan. We've watched all these episodes, and because I've seen the episodes so many times, a lot of times I'm looking around the crowd. So when I caught myself watching this movie, instead of watching right on the ring, sometimes I'm looking to see what the extras, the crowd and the fans are doing. And
did you see somebody playing you?
Say it again.
Did you see somebody playing you in the crowd?
No, nobody playing me.
I had to do it. I had to do it.
But really early on, and it caught my attention, was the fan with the Cosmic Cowboy sign over in the corner. And, it didn't fit the scene at all. And what the hell? And I noticed it. I actually asked on Twitter and on Facebook. I said, if anybody that's seen it early can find the reference to the Cosmic Cowboys, I'll send you a world-class program. And nobody got it in the time limit that I put up, but Brad Stutz on Twitter, he did put it, text me last night, it direct messaged me that he did see the sign in the movie. And so I am sending him a world-class program from back in the day, but it didn't fit at all, but it was kind of funny that they threw that in. It made me happy and stuff. Um, hey, Mike, that Harley race quote, promo that was in the middle of the movie, that I really like that and stuff. I thought that was a really good one. I didn't mind Ric Flair as much as I'm hearing a lot of people didn't like the Ric Flair character in the movie. Gino, they had a Gino in there for a second, and I thought that was really good as they were headed off into the ring, and they had Brody, who didn't do too much in the movie, but it was still it was kind of neat to see Gino Hernandez play because I'm such a Gino guy too and everything. So they had the characters in there, and the sportatorium, the whole deal, the whole atmosphere of all that felt really good. I am not putting it down. Like obviously, I guess the WWF, they own the logo, so they had to change the logo. I'm not happy with the announcer was supposed to be Bill Mercer, but it just didn't make any sense. That guy, I know he's been in other shows. People recognize him from different things, but that guy had no pizzazz. I thought that was the weakest link of the movie was the guy playing Bill Mercer. I really did. And even though I love Mark Lawrence, I understand people would expect the Bill Mercer character, but I just thought that guy, it just didn't do anything for me.
So the guy playing Mercer, that one didn't bother me. Flair, I gotta say, that was not good.
I'm getting a lot. I've heard some people that have gone a little easier on him. I didn't mind. It was quick, and it was good. Let's I'm just going to keep hitting quick things, Mike, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. I just had to get my Flair thought in, because honestly, if you want to talk about something in the movie that again, I didn't get hung up on the historical inaccuracies of the timelines and the deaths and all that stuff, but Flair in it, I just was like, this guy nothing about him reminds me of Flair. Like, It just didn't. It seemed like a miss. Harley, I got. The Freebirds, I got. Like I got them, but the Flair they didn't cast that well. If I'm gonna have a complaint,
one of my biggest questions on this is when the Von Erichs go in there against the Freebirds and they whip them into the ropes and they do a triple clothesline instead of a triple drop kick.
Yeah,
that just kind of threw me. The triple drop kick, usually it was the three doing it to one, but in this, I think they did a triple clothesline to each one of them at the same time. And I'm kind of like, that triple drop kick was a big deal. But I guess, and it seems like it fit because later they're going to show Mike that hurt his shoulder throwing a drop kick. So I was kind of like, I thought that should have been done and stuff. Let me just hit. These are going to be in way crazy order, okay? Because it's just how I saw it and stuff. Let's see. As I said, Kevin and David had been to Japan several times before David went. After the Flair match with Kevin, so Kevin in that Flair match, and now I put that match on Twitter. The finish of the Kevin and Flair match was the Texas Stadium 1985 match where Fritz had to come into the ring and get Kevin off of Flair. And I put that up this week, and people didn't make the connection until a few started seeing the movie, and they're like, "Oh, okay, here's why you put that up and stuff." So that was that. They played it like it was at the Sportatorium, and then after the match, they're in the locker room, and Kerry, who we've already seen trying to get back in the ring and hurting and trying to wrestle without a foot, practicing with Kevin and everything, but when he walks out of the room in that scene, he's walking normal, bending his foot as if he's just walking. He didn't, we know watching the show that Kerry kind of learned this stance, and he kind of used that foot as a wedge the more he walked, and so that kind of, I think people noticed that because we had just seen where he had lost his foot, and now he just walked normal out of that scene. And so that was one thing. And I know I don't feel that's being picky because I felt the people watching with me, and I knew a buddy of mine was sitting next to me during it that knows what's going on, and he caught it too, that here he goes just walking out and stuff. Let's talk about that fantasy scene after when Kerry kills himself, and then they do a scene that's as if they're in heaven, and going across a lake, and there's the boy, his brothers are on a dock, and there they are they're all together in heaven. And let me tell you what, that is exactly the way those boys felt about it. That it was basically easier for them to do that because they knew they'd see their brothers on the other side. That deep love and that deep faith that they were going to see them, and it made it easier, that would be a better option than what they had. That leads me to the tragedies that they didn't cover. The fact is, they didn't cover the fact that David had been married and had a baby that died of SID, sudden infant syndrome, sudden infant death, after 13 weeks in 1978 when he was only 20 years old. He got divorced, he got married again, and another divorce, and then he was married to Tricia when he passed away. None of that marriage, none of that baby was talked about. Mike was married when he died. He got married in February of 1985 and was married a couple of years. And I know through the years she has said a couple of things online. Either, I believe, Shanna has said something, nothing mean, something, I don't know. But she's been on social media just a touch, I believe. So, there's things like that death, besides Chris not even being mentioned in the movie, which brings us to this. Kevin, as people thought going into this, what did they do? Did they shove Kerry and Chris together and make one character? Well, they certainly did on the death, because they both killed themselves in the same spot, not the same spot, but in the same property there in Edom, Texas, where Fritz had built the retirement, his home, and was living out in East Texas. They made this whole movie as if it was happening at the house in Denton where they had all grown up, which is not true. Fritz had already moved, building this house in East Texas. We know the whole story that, David died. It was actually middle of the night, night that David Manning drove to East Texas to tell Fritz, because of course we didn't have phones at the time. And, they play it different, as if Kevin walked in and found out about David that way. And, I'm not too bothered by that. But when Kerry kills himself there under the tree, so close to the house, that was really how Chris killed himself. And Chris, had an argument with Kevin the night before over a VCR. That guy had just, unfortunately, Chris had just had, problem, just was upset with the world, basically. I've heard other interviews where he just didn't get along with people. He's just, bothered by stuff, just had his own demons in his head. But, Kerry, I think he had driven off, into the pasture somewhere back when he shot himself in the heart, while Chris, shot himself in the head, actually. But those were off in Edom, Texas, which is about, 90 miles from Dallas, not in Denton, or, not on the way to Denton out of Dallas, where those guys, actually grew up and stuff. You want to throw anything in there, Mike?
I wanted to go back to what you said about the way they viewed things when they died, because I think you and I have listened to enough of the shoot interviews with Kevin, and we've just even heard Fritz on world-class television when David died, talking about seeing him, like literally telling his boys in that moment, we'll see him again. You'll see him again one day. Like, I just remember that interview that he did on TV when all the boys are sitting there, and so that moment, like, I think you said it well. Just for the record, if we have anybody who's listening to this who's not religious, more power to you. Practice the way you want to practice. They were really. This is very sad, what I'm about to say, because I feel like if you're listening to this and you're ever suicidal, man, try to get help. Don't go that route. Do not go that route. I know times get tough. We all go through mental, weaknesses and moments in life where it just seems really, really hard, and it just seems like there's not going to be a time where we come through on the other side. But don't take that step. Just please don't reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I don't have the number memorized off the top of my head, but don't take that route. With the boys, with the Von Erichs though, it's like Lance said, they were, so into their faith that they really thought, not thought. That's the wrong word. Well, no, they really thought.
They believed. They
believed they were taking like the way out where they could see their brothers again. And in David's case, it wasn't suicidal. It wasn't ruled a suicide. I need to stress that. I've talked to Wild Bill Irwin. He was in Japan with him. He's kind of told the story from his eyes at what happened over in Japan. You can listen to it on the YouTube channel. It's that you're listening to this on right now. You can just search for it, Wild Bill Irwin, and I think I even have a playlist created for when he was on the show years back. But the boys, like, they really felt like, we're going to, Kerry was going to see his brothers. Like, that's not the way they portrayed that. I feel like is really how we were led to believe they believed. The other thing I wanted to say, this is crazy, but that this kind of happened in this movie the way it did. I was talking to my wife years ago about, let's say you believe in heaven. Let's say you believe, even if you don't believe in heaven, there's some type of afterlife. Let's say you believe in that. I'm not the most religious person in the world. I do believe in God, for the record, and I don't know if there's a heaven, but I kind of believe there is something after this. I hope there is. But I want to say this. I was telling my wife, I was like, you ever think about, when you die, okay, and you meet your relatives who've gone before you, do you meet them at the stage that they were when they died? For example, if you had a cousin who died at the age of 10, do you meet their older self or do you meet them at the age of 10? And she's like, yeah, I never really thought of that. And the crazy part in this movie was they actually showed that example that I was thinking of, where it's like Kerry commits suicide. He is strolling down the river in this boat or stream. I don't want to call it a big, it's not a big river. David's there. Mike's there. And then not only are they there, but Jackie is there, who died. Was it at the age? I thought it was at the age of 7, but I thought they said 5. I forget. He was electrocuted to death. He's there, but he's there as his little self, because when he died, he was only whatever age, 5, 6, or 7. I forget off the top of my head. And Kerry says, wow, you're my older brother, Jackie. And Kerry picks him up and holds him and hugs him. And it's kind of a chilling moment, because going back to what you said, Lance, they really believed like the happiness was waiting for them. And I'm not saying happiness is not waiting for us in the afterlife, nor am I saying it's not or is. I'm saying they portrayed their belief in the movie at that moment in a way that I don't know if I was expecting that, like in that like chilling of a way. It didn't bring me to tears because I think you and I have become numb to the story of the deaths because we've talked about them for 50 million years now. We've lived it. We talked about it. We're kind of at the point where it's like, my mom died over 10 years ago. I can talk about her now and think about her now generally without tearing up. But I get sad, but I don't like just start bawling. When they like that moment, I didn't cry, but if you were watching this for the first time, I could see people bawling the way they portrayed that, especially when he grabs his little brother or his older brother, Jackie, who was older than him, but in death, he's younger than him. It was just like the way they did that whole scene, tremendous. I can't give them enough credit. The way they pieced that story together and showed it to like fruition and through an end point for them.
Good.
And thanks
Mike,
for letting me talk, Lance.
Bullseye. I think that was great, Mike. You hit it right on the head. Exactly. That was exactly how they believed it, and I loved it. I really did. I thought maybe they could have put it at the end. I don't know how well that will play to people that don't understand that was their thinking.
That's
Even
what that's why I
people
pointed it
that
out.
have strong faith, they were not going to understand that that was the way the boys thought, but it was the way the boys thought. That's what the boys put in their suicide notes.
Right.
Going to be together. So that's how
Right.
we know, we have facts that's why
Right.
they believe it. Wasn't made up. It wasn't a fantasy. That was how they really felt. And they showed that. I wouldn't have minded if they put that at the very end, but I understand what he did at the end, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Let's just keep rolling stuff. There was they did mention something in there about who David was, named after. David was named after Doris's brother, Eugene David, who he died of a brain tumor when he was 14, and I believe that they did mention that in the movie. So that's one tragedy that they didn't omit and stuff. I always say lots of tragedies that they didn't mention because Kerry had two girls when he died, and that's a tragedy right there.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
was a judge here. Kerry was facing jail, and there was a judge that was quoted in the newspaper right after he died. I probably have that in there that said, he took the coward's way out. I hated that. And I hated it because maybe that is how suicide is seen a lot, or definitely was back in the day. But the fact was, and it doesn't make it all right that he killed himself and he had two girls, but that the mental state that those guys were in, they believed that they were going to see each other, and that was what they wanted to be for the best. Let's talk about David's passing in the movie. David passed, and they show the funeral, and I thought, how are they going to capture the biggest funeral in Dallas, Texas? And when I say the biggest funeral in Dallas, Texas, I'm not far off. There's probably been a few, billionaires that have died that they've had big ones, but the massive funeral. They had the church up in Denton, and then they came down to Dallas proper to Grove Hill Cemetery, and it was just a billion fans. The Von Erichs welcomed the fans. That's it. They knew how to work it as far as real or not, that they had these fans that they felt, and there's still these people on Facebook, how attached they are to them. They might have just hugged Kerry at their high school gym when he came to wrestle once, but it was a big deal. Some of the most important memories of their life are when they went to see the Von Erichs and got a hug. And it's funny, a while ago, earlier today, I put a tweet out. It was Kevin leaving the sportatorium in his truck, and it's all the women lined up to get a little last bit of sugar as he was driving off. And those people, the fandom is way over the top because we were able to reach out and touch these guys. Plus, these guys live down the street from us, basically. Okay, they lived down the road. Anything that they had done, they grown up here where we all grew up. That's why we feel such a close attachment to these guys. If you're listening to this and you're not from this area, it's hard to know the geography, but they watch the same TV shows we watch. They weren't that much older than all of us. If I'm watching and I'm 13, these guys are 23. They still look kind of teenage. That was the draw. I thought they looked like the coolest guys at the YMCA. Is why I got into it. I was like, man, these look like the cool brothers I don't have. I'll say that always. That's completely my fandom. Is these guys look like the cool brothers that I don't have, because I don't have any brothers. I got a sister, always great to me and everything, but she wasn't a cool dude who could have shown me the world. Because if you got a cool brother that's rocking and rolling and having a good time, you can go out and have a good time. The world. Otherwise, you kind of learn fend for yourself unless you meet a cool crowd and stuff like that. But anyways, when they show the funeral procession for David, they do show the cars going down the cemetery, and they pan out, and they do show a lot of people that are along the roadside. I would have liked it if they'd pulled back a little farther and explained how huge, or had the news report. That would have helped a lot if they had like the news story, somebody playing a news anchor like on the local news, explaining today David Von Erich died. Here's the funeral, or whatever. Here's today's funeral, and shown it and explained that there were a billion people at this cemetery. and by far he's the most famous person at this cemetery, which is a huge cemetery in Dallas. But if you ask them who's famous out there, they will say the Von Erichs, the first person. And I can tell you the truth. My mom asked them one time, tested the lady out there at cemetery who was out there to see if she said the Von Erichs, because I was such a big fan and stuff. And both my parents are there now and stuff. Um, so that's the funeral. I would have liked them to have made a bigger deal out of that, but that's just one of the things they couldn't do. The wedding. Let's talk about Kevin's wedding during this. The pictures that we've seen of a Von Erich wedding are always pictures of Kerry's wedding. They're wearing the same clothes in this movie that they wore at Kerry's, the gray suits or so. So that's kind of what they based that on. And that wedding was Kevin actually got married in 1980. And, in the movie, they made it a shotgun wedding. And I said, yeah, shotgun wedding? Let me look up when Kristen was born, and it could have been. It could have been. So I'm not denying that wasn't. But the thing about Pam and Kevin, Pam was in Kerry's class, and she would hang out at practices, and that's how she met Kevin. She certainly didn't meet him outside the sportatorium. I mean, that didn't happen. I mean, those guys coming in, they might sign a couple autographs, and they came out. People were hugging autographs. It's a crazy scene, but she didn't walk up to him at the sportatorium like that at all.
Hollywood. We got to tell a story. We got to make it seem like a remarkable love story between the two. And and to be fair, like it was funny because they actually portrayed Kevin as like okay, he's got this great body, he's a star. They portray Kevin, he's like, oh shucks, I can't tell, this girl's hitting on me. It's like they portray him like he's naive to, you got this, good looking woman kind of making some moves at you kind of. And, and the reason I say that, she's like, didn't your daddy ever teach you how to ask questions? And because Kevin is just like, he's just one word answering things. Like he's just oblivious to the fact that this is a beautiful woman in front of his face. It was tremendous.
He didn't have time for that. He's focused on his body, obviously, and the movie is all about him in keeping that shape up. And as far as losing his virginity in the truck to her, you don't know. But they did meet very early. Maybe that is the only girl I don't know that, but still, I had to look it up because I thought they were actually married a little earlier. And I know in interviews, Kevin has talked about the fact that maybe it was the fact that he got married so early that it kept him on the straight and narrow. And she played it like that in there. She stayed, she laid down the law kind of deal. Not laid down the law, but you gotta get past this. We got family to raise. She was wonderful. And I don't know her well. She's one of the first people that ever followed me on Twitter, and she's got a nice sense of humor. But she's a gentle soul. And in this, they kind of made her bouncy and everything. I don't know. I love in the movie, man. I fell in love. I don't know Lily James. I've heard the name, but in this movie, I was just in love with her and stuff. I think everybody will. I mean, she came off so just bubbly and wonderful in this. And and the fact that Fritz liked her, told him to stay with her, don't put her down, somebody else will pick her up, I think is what it said. So it was cute, and they really shoved it together. I like the scene, so in the movie, Mike is supposedly, his band is going to play at a gig at the University of Texas at Arlington, so, and his mom wouldn't let him go because he was too young. But the boys and Lily James sneak out of the house and take him, and they really shows Mike in a good light, that he got up there and sang this song, and everybody was just partying. There's a keg, and they're just acting crazy but showing love. It's a party scene, and they're partying, and I think it shows them doing a few bumps and things like that, which I think Kevin had admitted years ago if they were at a party they would do something like that. but it just showed their love, for each other and stuff again. So I really like that, even though it's kind of made up and everything. And of course the timeline is just totally out of whack. It's hard to, you know David, Mike was 3 years younger than Kerry. And then Kevin was born in 57, David at 58. Jackie had been born, was the oldest, but he died, and then they had Kerry. He just right out a year later. So Kerry's born in 60, Mike's born in 63, and then Chris 69. So there's a big difference between them and stuff. So that scene was good because it kept the brotherly love together. They play it in the commercial all the time where he says, "Look at my beautiful brothers," and they're just the life of the party. And stuff. So it's cool. It's just you can't keep up with how they're supposed to be in each scene because of how it's done. In the movie, obviously they kind of made the Texas title more important than the American title. So, just get past that and stuff. I always felt that the American title was Kevin's, while David always had the Texas belt, but whatever, and stuff. They left one quote out that I really thought that they would put in there, and did I already say it, Mike? Did I say? Oh, I didn't. I didn't say it though. It was when they were in that bathroom stall, and he said, "Don't you go over to Japan and die on me." That's what Kevin said to David, and they didn't put that in there. Did I already say that? I don't know if I already said that, but
no, no, they didn't. You didn't say that, but they didn't put it in the movie. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the fact is they didn't put that in the movie where he said, and that is something Kevin has said many times, "Don't you go over there and die on me." But
right.
He did go over there and die on him and stuff. I have to say, without a doubt, I knew that the line about the fact that he was not a brother anymore had to be how they ended the movie. And they ended that movie with that line, and then the two boys, which was those two boys, and I've talked to more people. They were totally confused because Kevin, of course, had two girls long before he had the two boys. And in fact, his oldest girl, Kristen, remembers being in the locker room sportatorium with Kamala scaring her and stuff like that. I've heard her talk. And they had these two boys in the movie, but the boys had long hair, so I think it confused people if that was Marshall and Ross, but they did call them that, and then later they did. And the movie was tragedy, 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 and at the very end he's sitting there in the yard crying, and the two boys come over and he says, I'm not a brother anymore," and they say, "We'll be your brother." And that's the only uplifting thing, because they don't advance 20 years to showing, well, they do in the credits. They show a picture of Kevin and the whole family in Hawaii and happy, but there's no way they just didn't advance it. You had to just think that, okay, he's got those two boys, he's gonna make it, which he did, and did make. But it's still, they didn't have a lot to turn at the end to make any kind of happy ending. Just the fact that he's got these boys, and hopefully over time it's going to calm down. His anger is being upset about this and everything. I tell you, the boys did wrestle for years with Fritz. He wasn't retired when they started wrestling. He didn't retire till 82. It was the end of 81 middle of 81 where he really stopped his schedule. And Kevin had been wrestling since 76, and David right around then, and then Kerry in 79 basically got started going full time. Throughout the movie, they don't mention crowds going down with the tragedies. I believe it was cut out, or they just didn't have time to say it, because all of a sudden you think the business is going well. You have no idea, if you don't know this, that the business, because of the brothers' problems, the business is dropping. And they say the crowds went down after Kerry went to the WWF. Well, that made it sound like it was still it's still world class, when we know it hadn't been world class for a couple of years when Kerry did leave. And Jarrett had bought the promotion way earlier than what it shows in the movie. And the fact is, in the movie they show that Kevin wanted to sell to Jarrett, and Fritz did not. And that's not true. Fritz had wanted out forever, and thought that, and Kevin never wanted Jarrett in there at all. And there's lots of bad blood to that and stuff. Um, MJF, MJF was shown as Lance in the movie in one quick wrestling scene, and it made it look like he wouldn't tag out to Kevin. But anybody who's not a wrestling fan wouldn't catch on too much to what was going on in that scene. Obviously, they cut out, and MJF has said they cut out a scene, and it must have been something in the back where they mentioned that this is Lance, and Kevin shows that he's not happy about Lance being there, because that's kind of an awkward scene in the movie where he's not tagging out to Kevin. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you do, unless you know the story, the end up story, you might not put two and two together that MJF at that moment is supposed to be Lance. Like, I think most people who listen to this review would know that MJF was playing the role of Lance Von Erich. But if you're just a casual viewer of this, by like a lot of people that we know, that they remember the Von Erichs, but they haven't watched wrestling in 30 years, maybe longer, they may go see the movie to watch the story because it's kind of nostalgic to them, thinking about the Von Erichs as they grew up watching them, but they haven't watched wrestling in so long. They just wouldn't know, oh, that was Lance Von Erich, and Kevin was getting upset because they portrayed as Lance not wanting to tag him in as he finished the match and won it. And Kevin's on the apron. He's like, kind of, you can see his face just getting a little flustered. And then when MJF, aka Lance Von Erich, pins whoever was in the ring with him, Kevin then kind of is like, oh yeah, hey, but you can tell it's like a phony, yay, we won. You wouldn't know that unless you just are kind of I don't want to say the diest of diehards, but if you're just somebody who hasn't watched wrestling in 35 years and you just wanted to go see this movie because you remember the Von Erichs from when you were younger, you that might have just flew right past you because they just didn't make it obvious to me. I mean, we knew it was obvious to us, but there's people with a different perspective that just wouldn't have had that obvious, oh, that was supposed to be Lance.
During the wedding scene, they it's Fritz and Doris are sitting there and they get a little frisky with each other, like you want to go back to the house and get it on top, a little bit like that to show that there's the friskiness. And they play her the way they do, that she's not involved at all. But at the end of the movie, after the deaths, she's sitting there painting in the living room, and he comes in and asks about dinner, and she said, I didn't make it. And that showed a crack in the foundation, that she had enough. And of course, they didn't go into that she left him or anything like that. They didn't go into Fritz's death. He died of brain cancer in 94 or 5, I'm thinking 94. And they didn't go into that, but they did at least say, she finally had enough. Just touched on the fact that she was sick of it, sick of how it had been. And we don't know her real feelings or anything like that. That's it's made up basically. But yeah, I didn't, she played it just like the guy wrote it. I just don't know how much of it was actually her and how much that really went on in their family. I like the opening scene, one of the opening scenes where David walks into the kitchen and they're all there and he doesn't have pants on, and she's like, David, pants tomorrow or so. There is a scene like that, not exactly, but in one of the documentaries on the Von Erichs, one of the early ones. I can't remember which one. I can't remember that name of that one. But they're sitting at the kitchen table just like that, and David's telling the story about a fan putting bubble gum in Ric Flair's hair, and they're laughing about it. And I thought, okay, he saw that scene because that's exactly like that scene is where they're sitting at the kitchen table and stuff. So I just, it's little things like that, but that's what I do, is I want to compare what really we know compared to what they put out there, because this guy, those private scenes, yeah, I don't know you behind closed doors and you don't know me, so how could this guy who grew up in England do it? The visually, it looks like he took 1986, the beginning of 86 is what it looks like, as far as all the wrestling. Well, not the David thing, because David didn't make it in 86, but when they show the Freebirds look exactly like they looked in 86, and the black tights and all that and stuff. So I can talk about the exacts on that, and you get into it. I enjoyed seeing what they captured of the Sportatorium. I thought it was tremendous. As somebody who just lived in that building for several years, it was great. When Kerry goes out at Texas Stadium, I thought it was, it's kind of a cool visual. The fact that he's going out there, it would have been nice if they could have used real footage and gone to it. See, they could have used newscast as something to show the Von Erichs, because they did make the news here and there, and they certainly made the newspapers. And I would have used newspaper clippings at times, showing or recreated the newspaper clippings, and just kind of showed the timeline, because they just didn't show the time except way early in the movie of what the time frame was, what year. I think they put 78 or something on the screen for a second. But obviously, everything went on for, it was a 10-year period. Well, even though I'll actually 13-year period that this movie covers. They made it. Did you get the feel, Mike, Kerry killed himself the night he won the NWA title?
Okay, so I was in the movie theater when I texted you, and I think you misunderstood what I was saying. I'm watching it, and Kerry wins the title, and then they show him later that night back at the house. He's got the NWA World Heavyweight title on the kitchen table. He's sitting there having a beer. Kevin comes in and congratulates him, and Kerry says something like, "Yeah, it's good to finally have the title in the family, right?" And Kerry, they portray it as they hug or whatever, talk for a minute, and then Kerry says something like, "Go clear my head," and Kerry goes and gets on the motorcycle. And you said killed himself the night. No, the night he wins a title, the way they portrayed it in the movie is he goes and gets on his motorcycle, and they portray it that he has the motorcycle accident the night he wins the NWA World title, and they portray it as that's the night that, we know the story. He didn't lose his foot that when he had the accident, which was much later. He didn't lose his foot that night. He had complications where he ended up losing a part of his foot later on. The initial surgery, he didn't lose his foot. So, but the way they portray it in the movie is he has the accident and half his foot's gone. So it was really when we said they advanced things like at a like astronomical light year pace, that was one of the things I pointed to on how, no, that's not what happened. He won the belt. He went and defended it, X amount of times in 14, 15 days, whatever it was. And like, he didn't hold the title for long. If you're listening to this and are a Von Erich fan, you know that. But he didn't have the motorcycle accident the night he won the title is the greater point I'm trying to make here. That happened later down the line. Not a ton later, but it certainly wasn't the same night.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. I know. I mixed up when I said that. They made it seem like that. Of course, Kerry wins the belt May of '84 in real life, defended it, had another year and a half of the heyday of wrestling, of that glory period. That was where they feuded with Gino and Chris.
Yeah.
And then they even had another feud with the Freebirds beginning of '86, and then he has the wreck June of '86. And here's exactly how I believe it. Everything I've put together, Brian Adias shoot interviews really helped me on this, and a few others that kind of study the timeline. He had that wreck at June of '86. That foot's just not healing. But they're trying. And Christmas night of '86, he goes to the ring with Mike and Kevin for a match. And at the end of the match, he shakes the rope so Brian Adias will fall. And if you watch it after he shakes that rope and he gets in the ring, he is limping. He is hurt. He is definitely hurt. And a month later, he is supposed to have his return match. And so that was Christmas night of 86. February 2nd of 87, he has that match against Brian Adias. It's actually shown on the Channel 11 show, but not shown on the syndicated channel Bill Mercer show. And during that, the foot is so hurt. There's the newsletters say whatever, how they prepared him for that with medicine and things like that. He hurts it during it, knows he's hurt. And basically, the foot just was not going to get well. It was too withered, too hurt. And that's when the amputation happened there right after that in February of 87. By May of 87, he's at Texas Stadium walking around ringside. And it's in October of 87 when he returns. And I tell you what, man, me and Mike have watched it. He looks great. No, he's not the same guy, but he's a monster as far as the meat he put on his bones. He put on so much weight, lifting weights and everything. And he worked on that foot it's tremendous how he worked on that one foot, doing everything he did, and then goes off to WWF on their full schedule and everything. As far as pain, I don't know if he had how the pain was. I know it was a lot of mental because he was a bodybuilder and he based a lot of his drive on making his body look great. I don't know how much pain you're in once you're hooked on something. And so anyway, his life did go downhill, but they of course pushed it very quickly and stuff. He shows up at the house with some girl rando that he's met, and of course in real life he's married and everything.
Yeah, he's married. Yeah.
WWF. But she's not taking him back because he's facing jail. He's really a shell of his former self. And there's pictures online of what Kerry looked like at the end, and it's hard for me to look at it. Sometimes I see people on Facebook, they'll say, "Oh, he looks great." I'm like, no, he looks horrible in those pictures. He's about to die. Take his own life, but he's already dead on the inside, basically. And that's why I say it was a tragedy, that his girls had to lose their dad and stuff. He throw something in, Mike. What you got, Mike? Mike?
I hit mute by accident. I want to talk about the thing with Kerry. I'm glad we talked about the thing with Kerry about the night he won the title. But that's what I wanted to ask you. Some of the matches that they showed, they didn't put. Okay, here's where we get nitpicky, right? They definitely didn't portray them in the actual places that they took place. The match with Kevin and Harley, did you take that was supposed to be in the Sportatorium in the movie?
In the movie, yes.
Okay.
As far as I think it was just made up. I mean, Kevin fought Harley. They had all their, world championship matches. It wasn't as rare as whatever they say in the movie. They fought them all the damn time. I got the results right here.
Right.
They fought them all the time. Now, David. And so here's the deal. In St. Louis, there was Sam Mushnick, an ally of the Von Erichs, a guy that brought them up there, put them in these main events in the Checker Dome, made them a big name outside of Texas and in the magazines. I mean, they gave them the Missouri state title, which was so considered the stepping stone to the NWA. All us old fans remember how the Missouri title was held in regard. And in the movie, they say, they kind of say, Sam Mushnick and the rest of the NWA, they won't do this and that. And that's totally wrong because Sam was an ally. It's Crockett that Kevin has said they didn't trust those guys, not trust those guys. He said we never knew where we stood with those guys. And things like that. And obviously they wanted to be world champions in ways. I don't think they wanted to travel like that, but their dad had kind of instilled that world champion, and David might have gotten the belt I still think if he won it at Texas Stadium, it would have been the same run that Kerry did. I still doubt that he was going to get that belt. I do, but they went with it in the movie like he was, set to do it. But at any time, they could, there was huge stadium shows at the time in Florida and other places where Ric Flair or Harley Race, they escaped with the belts just because people think that people say that. And I know plenty of workers that think that he was going to get the belt at Texas Stadium, but and Fritz may have thought he was going to get it, but Crockett was in charge of that belt. But the fact that they put Sam Mushnick's name in there as a guy that was against the Von Erichs, I had a problem with that.
Well, the whole thing with the belt, that was interesting the way they portrayed it. But Bill Irwin, when I talked to him, he feels like, and he's somebody who was, he worked there forever. So, I mean, I feel like he kind of knows enough, right? He said, and this was 5-6 years ago when we talked, so it's on YouTube. If I get this wrong, you can tell me I got it wrong. Even though it was a conversation I had, I just don't remember his exact words. He said something like he thought David would get the belt, but he wasn't sure if it was going to happen at that moment in Texas Stadium in May of '84. That was the way he worded it. He was like, yes, he was in line to get the belt, he being David, but he just wasn't sure if it was really going to happen at that moment. There's no, I think the way he portrayed it, and a couple other people that I've talked to, they feel like it wasn't, it would happen, but nobody is able to confirm if it was going to happen that day when it happened in '84 for Kerry. The way they portrayed it in the movie was, oh, David's gone. One of you is going to have to take his place. Who's going to do it? Kevin's like, I'll do it. Kerry's like, no, I'll do it. And then they portray it as Fritz flips a damn coin to see which one of the boys is going to get an NWA world title shot, which is definitely not how it went down. But they portray it in that way. So, again, that's one of those things where I knew watching it, I'm like, this is not how that went down. But it's a movie. So, what I think, Lance, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but I'm about to. If you go in with the expectations that you're going to watch a movie about the Von Erichs and pro wrestling that is a movie and doesn't have obvious, there's historical inaccuracies in it, you're going to enjoy it. You're just going to enjoy it. But you have to go into it knowing you're not literally seeing a diary of exactly how it happened. Year by year, match by match, item by item, title by title. It's just not that. And that's kind of, I think, what you see in that moment. Especially, we know there was no coin flip to see who was going to fight Flair for the title on that show because David died. That's not how it went down. So anyway.
Well, I do want to jump in, Mike. That is the story that they've consistently told.
That's not. That's okay. I don't.
That is. I just want to say.
Let me fix it. I don't believe that
story. And I thought when he flipped that coin, I thought, are they really going to show that they did? And they didn't. He flipped the coin. They didn't show it landing. Next thing they show is Kerry's at the stadium.
In the ring.
They did not do that. So, but that is the common story in that they flipped a coin, but it's hard to believe that they didn't because of the Kerry's the biggest thing in the world at the time, the biggest thing in the magazines. That's the biggest problem I have in the movie is that they don't get it over that Kerry is the man. They pushed it. David, was the man over Kevin, but they don't push Kerry Von Erich as the guy all over the magazines. Come on. Right. He's a big freaking deal at the time in wrestling, in real life around town. Well, there was a lot of fans, but, I think he hosted the Texas Jam one year at the Cotton Bowl and got booed. Everybody, the older guys in their mid-20s are going to boo Kerry because their girlfriends like him and, they're trying to be cool because wrestling's fake or whatever, But as far as in wrestling world, he's the biggest thing in the world, he really is. He's up there. It's Kerry, it's Hogan, and it's the Road Warriors all over the magazines. There's no doubt about it. The most popular, they could have just said, voted most popular wrestler in the magazines. Just anything to get over the fact that of what Kerry was and stuff. And I know I keep harping on that, but that's one of the big drawbacks is, besides his body not being there, they just didn't go with the fact that he was the one.
He looked like $1,000,000 like back then. That, and again, the story is a story, but that's just not. It's not. I don't think. Again, I said at the beginning of this, I didn't want to go over the historical inaccuracies in my eyes, but here's the other side of it. Somebody could say, "Well, Mike, were you there?" No, I wasn't. So technically, I guess the coin could be flipped. So it could have been flipped. And yeah, you're right. I wasn't
It was
there to
the
see it all.
consistent story. Yeah, I mean, I understand, Mike. I never thought that
Yeah.
Kevin was going to get the title either, but it is the consistent story that they've always told. Now, they didn't go with the cheeseburger story that Kerry lost his foot because they did surgery on it, and that in the middle of the night he was hungry and walked across the floor, and that's why the foot was damaged beyond belief. They didn't go with that. But Mike, I do have to ask you, what did you think of that scene? Because one of the most wow scenes in the movie when Kerry's had Kerry, they show Kerry headed for some lights in this movie, and they'd shown him drinking beer and stuff. And then the next thing you see is he's waking up. You see his back and his shoulder with all these, road rash, and that looks scabbed over and stuff. So kind of showing that there has been some time. And then he's on crutches and walks around the island in the kitchen, and they CGI the foot's gone, and it's whoa. That was pretty wild, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, that part is wild because again, we never knew back then that we knew about the accident, but we had no clue that he was missing a foot after a certain point. Like that. I don't even remember at what point. I've tried to recall at what point I remember first hearing about that and somebody telling me about it, and I don't remember. I just don't recall. Too much time has passed, but we never knew in the moment. But it is kind of wild to see that and go, "Oh wow!" Because it kind of puts you in the mindset of, what if I would have known back then that he was wrestling with half a foot? We never knew. And I know, you tell people that who didn't live it, we didn't know. And you and I have watched back all of these matches on a weekly basis on all these Patreon shows of Kerry working matches with a half a foot. And you can't tell. Even though we know he doesn't have a full foot, we can't tell looking at it. You just can't. I mean, every now and then he'll kind of like feel with the foot a little bit different than maybe he does with the other, but that's our minds playing tricks on us. That's because we know there's no foot. So we think in our mind, wait, he's doing something different right there. But we don't know. So seeing it back then, if you could put yourself way back in the late 80s to see that, if they really would have showed it with no foot, that was almost like what happened. It was almost like they showed it on the TV show. Look, here's his foot. How's he going to come back? Is it going to happen? That's kind of the way they portray it. Even though there's no way to go back in time and relive it like that. I don't know. That was kind of my take.
Yeah, it's about October of '88 when he had a match with Colonel De Beers in Vegas, and it comes off and he rolls under the ring. And word did travel. And I was a regular Sportatorium. That's right when I had started. And word did get around. I heard it and I kind of dismissed it. It just seemed like, I say it all the time, he had a brace around his foot. He jumped down on that wooden floor in front of me, and it sounded like it just had something surrounded it, a brace of some kind inside there. And obviously it was bigger. And, if you don't know and you see my Twitter, you can see me in my Twitter profile picture with Kerry at my feet. And I was at all those matches, basically the whole Lawler Kerry run. I'm front row. So he was in front of me fighting weekly, all the damn time I'm there. And, he's in front of me going around the ring all the time. And you heard that metal hitting the wood inside his shoe. Inside there was a weird sound, but you didn't know until he died. And when he died, that I was actually home with my parent. I was still going to college, but I had mono actually, and I was home, and that's when they said, that the secret that he had been living with, and they announced that Fritz that he had lost his foot, that he had not had a foot that whole time, that WWF run. And Kevin says, I was so proud of him doing that. I thought he should have told people that he didn't have a foot to be an inspiration, but that would have been totally against Fritz's deal. It's Fritz did not want them to look weak. Fritz didn't want them to be married. He did not want those marriages out there in the open that they were married. He needed to have that fantasy of those guys being single. He knew what sold tickets and everything, but everybody knew that Kevin was married, and then everybody knew Kerry had gotten married there in '83 to Kathy and stuff. So it wasn't big secrets at all, but still. The foot was pretty much a secret, though. That was just not out there.
You're talking about Fritz didn't want them to know they're married. There's that interview that they did in '82 where Kevin says something like, "Yeah, we can't wait to go to that town. There's a whole new flock of ladies or women waiting." When Lance says that about Fritz, there's some language in promos that leads you to believe, yeah, he didn't want that out there, like the whole they're married and good Christian athletes that are faithful to their women, because, at the end of the day, part of the sell of them was they're these hot, good-looking dudes coming to a town in your area, and we got to get the girls there. I mean, whether you think that's a way too toxic masculine thing to do nowadays, hey, that's for you to debate. I'm speaking of in 1982 when that promo's cut. They literally say, "Show up. We can't wait to see the flock of women there for us." So, I mean, it was pretty obvious that Fritz felt that way.
That was what it's based on, is the girls. I mean, they found that formula. They threw away some of the old ideas of what you had to have on a show, because, we're getting these girls there. We're going to have a bunch of young guys, the Von Erichs and Gino. Gino's loved just like them. He was and stuff. And of course, Gino's death's not touched in there. Brody's death's not touched in there. And if you know me, Gino's death, I go on and on about the effect that Gino's death had on the area, because it was Gino's death in February of '86, followed by Kerry's wreck in June of '86, that just slaughtered the territory and stuff. That was bad and stuff. It really was. There are lots of themes in the movie, and I'm all about I am about the details and what they changed, but, I don't hate the movie by any means. I don't know how fast I'm going to go see it back in the theater again. It's going to be, they've made a deal with Max. Max was HBO, and now it's called Max, whatever. And that's where they've agreed to stream it. Now, Mike, you said the theater was kind of empty. You went to an early showing. I talked to a buddy of mine that saw it at the same time you saw it somewhere else, and the theater was empty. So I don't know what it'll look like tonight as we record this the day it comes out. I went, to an early showing and was full, and I know a lot of people went to some showings. It was actually a week and a half ago that I saw it. I saw it on December 13th, the anniversary of a Super Clash with Kerry and Lawler, and that was the same night that they were on Dynamite and stuff. So, I don't know how long it's going to be. I predicted it wouldn't be in the theater very long and jump on over there, but, the commercials are sure badass. When I did watch Dynamite the other night and saw the commercials just on and on through it. And it's surreal for me that they are still, every once in a while the Von Erichs get the headlines, and here it is. These are all across America. This movie has come out, and everybody is seeing the Von Erichs, and they're seeing my hero, Kerry Von Erich, played by somebody small, not big at all. I didn't think they played him bad. They played Kerry as just he gone downhill. I thought they could have done a few things to show even more mental depression. They did. That was kind of neat, them showing him training and things like that. I wish they had explained a little bit more of how he finally got the hang of working on that foot, because man, that's just underrated, the fact that he could come and do what he could do, and we've already gone through that, but the fact that he could continue that profession is pretty insane, because imagine losing your foot and that's what you do is your life, and you've lost your foot. I mean, if you played the piano and lost your hand, I mean, it's bad. I mean, what could be worse?
It's pretty remarkable what he did. You were asking a question, but then you kept talking, Lance.
Sorry.
No. You were asking like how many people were there. So, man, there probably was about 5-6 other people in there besides me. Now, I went at the very first show, and it was early in the morning, 9:30 a.m. because I was off of work we're recording this on December 22nd of 2023. So I went very early this morning, very first show, and so. But what I was going to do was I was going to go online, and you can see how many tickets are available, like at the movie theater that I went and saw it at. Where I went and saw it is probably only 15 miles from where the location of the old Sportatorium was. That's now torn down. If you don't know, if you listen to this, I'm sure most people do. So, and I don't live too far from where the old Sportatorium is. Maybe I shouldn't say that as this is going out to not only our Patreon members but out on YouTube. But yeah, so Lance, he lives a little further away than me, but we live in the area. So to me, this would be an area where there would be a lot of people that would go see it. Is what I'm getting at. I'm gonna look later. I want to see what it looks like as far as tickets that are available for, like, there's like a 10 o'clock showing, 10:30 maybe tonight. I want to see like, how it's doing on debut night or the night it comes out, theaters across America, how it did then. But I'm looking forward to it. I want to see it. I do want to see it again. So I'll watch it on Max when it comes out. But look, I just, Lance, I don't know if we're wrapping up now or not, because we've been going almost 2 hours, but I just want to say, like, I went into it open mind, just thinking about it from, hey, I know this story really well. I know the historical pieces of it, the timeline. I know you do too. You know it better than me, obviously. I still enjoyed it. There are things that I'm like, yeah, that's wrong. But for me, I don't know if I ever thought I'd see a movie about the Von Erichs and the Iron Claw and world-class championship wrestling in movie theaters across America. Like, I know we got, Heroes of World Class and Triumph and Tragedy, those DVDs. Like, if you want more of a documentary about World Class, go watch those. I think they're probably both on Peacock. Maybe you can find them online on YouTube or Daily Motion. But, so I saw those. I remember buying those the day they came out. I'm sure you did too, Lance. But so I remember that stuff. But I never thought I'd see like an actual movie come out in the theaters across America on the actual Von Erich. So I don't want to be the wrestling fan who just got mad that they didn't get those things right. What I'll do is I'll have a bunch of friends who I grew up with will message me and say, hey, I didn't know. And I'll have a talk with them and go, yeah, that wasn't historically right. Here's how it really went down. But I'm glad like pro wrestling kind of gets a little spotlight in theaters in the mainstream, and that there are people out there who can watch it, and maybe in watching it, it'll entice them to like maybe research it and go read a little bit more about whatever they saw, because I think that's what you're doing. You're exposing people to a time period of wrestling that they wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise, or they were on the periphery, or they were a fan back then but really never, they left pro wrestling and now they're just like haven't seen it in years, and they're like, oh, I remember that family. And then they do some looking up and some research, and they read about maybe more about the family and what the real, some of the real historical pieces are of it. But I'm not hung up on the stuff that they quote unquote either didn't get wrong, didn't get right, or just didn't mention, because again, you'd have to do a mini series to really tell the true timeline and stories of this. It would be multiple seasons too to get it all in. So that's my thoughts, Lance. I don't know if you got any final thoughts as we
let's
start to
talk about
wrap up.
A couple more things. It's early on, they're in the office, and I guess there was that Gary Hart character, and I didn't catch on that was supposed to be Gary Hart. But it was a Gary Hart character in the movie. I even think they said Gary, and I didn't catch on. But, he says that ESPN called. And, that's not true. ESPN was a million years later. They were just
that was supposed to be Gary Hart?
There was Gary Hart in the, yeah, yeah. I didn't
I
catch
didn't
on.
even pick up on that.
I
I did.
know, I know, I
Okay.
know. Same here, same here. I got to
Okay.
see it again for that. But there was a Gary Hart character in there. He says that ESPN called what it really was syndication. The
Right.
whole Channel 39, Mickey Grant and them, Channel 39 had that big production truck, and they, decided to make this. They didn't call it rock and roll wrestling show, but man, they made rock stars out of the wrestlers and stuff. And that time period is really mid 82. I'm sorry, mid 80, end of 81 is when they filmed those first episodes that are on the network. Not episode 1, but episode 2, 3 are on the network and stuff. They actually then had a reunion Christmas show of 81 that's on the network, and then you start seeing those 82 starts building up the Fritz retirement, and by the end of the year the Freebirds come into Dallas. But that's what they really meant, was the syndication, or what that was really wasn't the ESPN deal by any means at that time. I enjoyed it, for what it is. I'm glad we finally get to talk about it. I've been waiting, forever to talk about it. I was when the trailer came out, all I could do was pick the trailer apart for the wrestling scenes and say, okay, this looks good, this and this and this. And then when I see the movie, I'm pretty forgiving. Um, you know, that's what you get. It's Hollywood. There's movies on everybody, and we just don't know all the ins and outs like we do about World Class, especially when we've watched every single episode in the last 5 years. Mike and I just finished 5 years of covering it with a fine tooth comb, because I go into a lot of detail, and I'm not going into these guys' personal lives really, except when there's a tragedy, because I don't know it. But I follow the World Class like maybe a baseball fan follows the statistics of their favorite team, and that's how I look at World Class. And we're not putting it down. We're just showing what went on. And these guys were under microscopes. They were in their early 20s. They're always going to be in their early 20s, because even Kevin, who left, Kevin did grow old. But by the time he was 34, he's out off TV and not seen for 20 years on TV. So in your head, he's still late 20s. And Kerry's always going to be, they're always going to be that mindset. We didn't get to see these guys grow up, overcome their demons like some people do. Some people make it through the hard times, some don't. Some self-destruct. We see it, with our stars and stuff that don't make it through the hard times. And so it's easy to knock them, but they were in their 20s, and they had a good time. For when they were alive, they were living a good life, fun. They weren't making millions of dollars like, I don't think any wrestlers were making. The magazines and the TV shows act like our wrestlers back in the day were making these big payoffs, or these $10,000 battle royal wins and stuff like that are kind of baloney. Some of the St. Louis payoffs are out there for the big shows, and they, some of the guys got paid really well. Sometimes Von Erichs got, 7, 12, anywhere, but where they were on the card, maybe 12, 14,000 for a show where they headlined with Flair, and then the next week they were lower on the card the next month, and they were making a lot more. But those payoffs are out there, and I don't know the payoffs in Dallas. I don't know what they were making, but I don't feel like they were making a ton at all, and they reference that in the movie, that Kevin's telling his dad, I see the books, and it's nothing like, we weren't making that kind of money. So who knows what and stuff. Kevin sleeping at the sportatorium when he was so upset about his brothers, I just don't know. I do know he was upset, and I don't know how he got his head straight around some of the things that happened, but there was something that is unknown back in that time of, he was dealing with his concussion problems himself. They don't put that in there, and that would have been something to add, was when he collapsed in the ring in early '87, and Bobby Fulton or Tommy Rogers had to give him CPR when he collapsed. And that's not in the movie. That's another, thing, a kind of a tragedy, that's something, he's just exhausted, and, concussions got him. And so, a lot of little things that they didn't add that they could have to make it even worse. And if it was a mini series over a week, it would be you could have put it all in there, couldn't you? And stuff. I guess they could make a TV show. That's what it would have been.
That's the problem with making it a series. When I say mini series, I meant more like a series like you'd see with like Ozark or something like that on Netflix. Like if you really made this into a series, the problem is it would be so tragic. I don't know if you'd ever want to do that, because outside of the Von Erichs deaths, then you got Gino. Like it's
and Brody.
And Brody. Like there's too much. It's that thing where, man, like life's already hard enough right now. We're inundated with negativity in our news cycle 24/7. I'm not advocating for a series on it. I'm just saying if you wanted to like tell the complete whole story of the Von Erichs and death and not only Von Erichs, but world-class championship wrestling, you would have a lot of negativity and sadness, and not even just that part. Then you got the part with like, Chris and the him going to jail, and it's stuff he did. Chris Adams, that is, not Von Erich.
No, so of course, Chris Adams. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like, So you have other pieces of it where it's like, I don't know if you could make a movie out. I mean, not a
and
movie,
there's
but
not
a series
the audience for it. We're going to see this weekend whether how fast this thing goes to streaming, if there was really the audience even for this. If Zac Efron, I'm sure, is going to help, but I just don't know. And if they had concentrated more on the wrestling storyline, I think it would turn the average, the non-fan off, because I don't think they're there for the story, and they did get the brotherly story right.
Yeah. Outside of Chris not being in it, yeah, they got it right, man. They got again, I talked about the scene when Kerry kills himself and is floating up the river or stream and meets his brothers like that. That's what they believed wholeheartedly, how peaceful it would be, and they got that part right, man. They got that down with what they felt, how they felt.
We didn't mention the part, when Kerry supposedly kills himself. Kevin was like on the porch, and Kerry's looking at what's going on, and he kills himself over behind a tree. And Kevin goes over there and picks him up and brings him into the house and puts him on the table. That was, that's just weird. That didn't. It can't possibly have happened. That it's just crazy. It seems like. Maybe that happened with Chris. Maybe, Chris was found by Kevin and Doris. Maybe he did pick him up and bring him in the house. But, Kevin certainly didn't pick up Kerry and bring him in the house. And I just thought that was odd that they portrayed it that way.
Little weird, but I didn't get hung up on it. But because to me, it was like a moment for Kevin. Here he is once again grieving.
Yeah.
It was weird the way that was put together, but I took that as more of a Kevin moment. Just, he knew his brother was gone, but he's like, I just can't leave him laying here outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was And the choking Fritz thing, that I don't believe that ever happened. It would have gotten out. I've never heard that. And how would this guy wrote this movie, he wouldn't have heard that. I mean, I don't know where he got his sources, but I've never heard of Kevin choking Fritz.
And if you've never heard of it,
I think Kevin would have said something in those moments that Kevin said these other things about the favoritism and stuff like that. I think he would have said something about choking Fritz.
Especially knowing that he said the statement about Fritz telling him, basically, I don't have to worry about you killing yourself. You don't have the heart to do it. If he's going to make that statement, surely he would have at some point mentioned, yeah, I choked my dad and they had that little tussle in the yard, but he never, I'd never heard that before. And you telling me you've never heard it tells me he's never said it.
And they made, and again, they made the boys out to be a little older than, it's weird on that timeline what they did and stuff because there was no girls, but, one was born in 88 and one, Ross was born in, Ross was born in 88. So, by 93, when Kerry's killed himself, he's 5 years old. And, those boys seemed a little bit older than that. And then Marshall would have been younger. So but they tried, just had to put something at the end to give hope that here he is. He does have these boys that are going to help him move on. And then they show the picture of the fact that they've moved to Hawaii, or either it was back. I don't know if it said, did they say move back to Texas? I think they did, and stuff. And they showed a picture of all of them together, all the grandkids and stuff. And that was really nice. I wish there had been more pictures at the end during the credits, like, real pictures. Talk to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, get real pictures. Talk to Lance Peterson, get real pictures. Anyway, I'm not putting it down and stuff. I hope everybody enjoyed this review. We do move along a little faster on the episodes that we've covered the last 5 years on World Class, and we put a lot of effort into those shows. And we're fixing to go back and start with the beginning of 82, the very end of 81, 82, that I did not cover with Mike. Mike had covered some of 82 with somebody else, and then I jumped in right after the cage match of 83, which, if you listen to the shows, you can hear the passion of how much I love 1983. And if you see my Twitter, Lance Peterson at SMU Heavyweight, you can see the good old days and go down the rabbit hole of looking at my Twitter account that will take you back to all the good times.
Yeah, Lance has got all the memories like preserved on Twitter. Hopefully Twitter never goes away, because we're going to lose all of that preservation you've done over the years and capturing key moments via photos and programs. Yeah, we'll lose that if we ever lose Twitter. So hopefully
it did go down. Happen. Twitter went down a couple of nights ago. I thought oh man, the cave days. But I do try to stick a few things on some different Facebook groups, but nothing like my Twitter and stuff. And that has, I used to be heavy on the programs. I do have the programs going back. Everybody makes fun of me on Booking the Territory about having all the programs, but I do have them going way back. But, I also, I know a lot of the Texas history. I try to know what was going on in each of the decades at the Sportatorium. And, that doesn't include really Houston. I don't know, I know what was going on and stuff, but it's, it's the Dallas-Fort Worth area, big time wrestling, and then World Class, then to USWA. I don't claim to be the USWA expert, as I was already in college. I was going down there all the time, but I wasn't watching the TV. And it's funny, when you go all the time, it doesn't stick like when you see those great things on TV, like the Cage Door or the Decency versus Phil comment, or my favorite, the old country whipping match in November of 83.
Yeah.
It's stuff. It's when it's on TV and you can watch it, you got your VHS tape and you rewatch it during the week, or have it watch it for years and years. I'm saying this before we had the network where it's at our fingertips and everything. Yeah. Hey, Mike, last thing, they were driving that truck in the movie, and they even got me thinking that truck was brown in real life, because I remember that truck. I was like, and that truck was shown in different vignettes that they did. So I went back to that valet for a day, and David was driving that four-door old Ford truck, and it was blue. And I was like, oh man, the movie got me on that one. I was remembering that truck as brown, and that's what happens in a lot of these things is, people remember that, and they say they remember this or that because that movie's going to change how people remember things and stuff. But
yep.
Yeah, in the end, Fritz, maybe he is to blame pretty bad for being pretty rough on those boys. That tough love, And athletic accomplishments are everything. Nothing else matters. Doesn't matter if Mike was Mozart. He's going to have to go into the family business.
I listened to Super Dave on. He did his show last week. He had David Manning on his show, and I listened to it. I was actually watching it live that night because he streamed it on YouTube, and he had kind of was talking about Fritz, the tough love, And one thing I told him, I made a comment because I wasn't on with them, but I was in the chat room. I said, it's hard, but we all do this. We judge people from the past oftentimes by today's standards. And in life, you progress, and over generations, you progress. Like our grandfather's parents or their grandparents were probably much tougher on them than our parents were on us. And I just speak from a perspective of not being in the Fritz Von Erich generation, but I think about like how hard my grandfather was on me, World War II vet. He was just a mean old man, but he loved me and his grandkids, but he was tough love. Now, he didn't never say to me what Kevin claimed Fritz told him about you don't have the courage to kill yourself, but he was that tough love. Like in the way he talked was very, very condescending and tough. I try not to, he would say things to me as his grandson that I would never say to my kids. I try not, that's what I mean by like judging the past by today's standards. Like we kind of figured out, I think there's something to not being too harsh on kids, but I also think sometimes there's a balance. You got to give a little tough love, but you got to know when to pull back. And I don't want to judge Fritz in that way as you watch this movie, but I think that's kind of what happens, not only with Fritz, but it's even beyond that. He was just a really hard person on his kids, but he did come from a generation. It's not an excuse. I'm just stating what I think was happening there. That does not make an excuse for him telling Kevin, if indeed that story is true, you don't have the heart to kill yourself. I don't have to worry about that with you. That's just twisted and messed up. But it's tough. It's tough when you because you're kind of judging a generation. We live and we learn, and hopefully in society we improve, and hopefully we keep improving. But it doesn't mean that mistakes aren't made in the past. Now I say that as a parent who, when my kids were in little league sports, would say, I'm tired of these goddamn participation trophies. So I guess I'm the tough one in that way, because I'm like, y'all don't need no damn participation trophies. What did y'all do to earn this? That's me. That's my philosophy. But I'm definitely not as hard on my kids as, my parents or grandfather was on me. So anyway, I kind of wanted to say that as we wrap up and thinking about Fritz and them nailing the character, but they did nail that character. And that dude, he played that part phenomenally. It was excellent.
Yeah, it's what's funny is he's about the same age as Mike Von Erich. It would be in real life if he's 60, and that's how old how Mike would be, born in 1963. The movie, projected to gross around $6 million, and it's opened in 2,500 theaters over this weekend. And we'll just see how long it stays in the theaters and stuff. It's surreal that they made this movie on guys that, I'm so, these are my superheroes. I mean, people got Batman and Spider-Man and all that. And these were Supermen that I got to go watch all the time. You got to reach out and touch them, and everybody reached out and stuff. You want to, they shake their hands. The girls got kisses and stuff. And people remember a little differently. David wasn't they try to kiss him and stuff, and he wasn't, kissing on the lips. It was really because Kerry, on TV would come down the aisle and give a girl a huge kiss a lot. It really got, that it was Kerry was getting all that love. And Kevin, they were dragging him down too as they came to the ring. But it was Kerry really doing that and stuff. It was like good old times, man. And I appreciate Mike, everybody listening today. And I hope you'll join over on Booking the Territory and our little show. And we have a good time over there, and I could try to keep it moving with what's going on in world class.
Yeah, you can become a BTT patron at tinyurl.com/PatreonBTT. That's tinyurl.com/PatreonBTT or patreon.com/bookingtheterritory. Lance and I, like Lance was saying, we've covered from late 82, or Lance joined in January of 83, but I did do some episodes with Doc and Harper, my co-host, in 82. So late 82 all the way through October of 88, we would generally, for the most part, cover 2 episodes per week. So we do every other week, we'd cover 2 episodes of World Class, and we get into all the matches and everything going on at the time. Lance is great because he's got all the results. He's got house show data. A lot of times he'll cover. He's got the different programs of what was advertised versus what actually ended up happening at some of the events. Lance is great because he gives the backstory. He can tell you, because he's got the Channel 11 knowledge of the other show that was taking place versus the syndicated show. He can tell you, hey, what was going on the Channel 11 show that we might not have any idea what was going on the syndicated show. Growing up, I got the syndicated show in South Louisiana. I didn't get the Channel 11 show because I didn't live in Texas. Lance did, so he's got all of that knowledge from going to all the shows, watching all the programs, where he just doesn't miss a beat. And I honestly challenge anyone out there to know more about their home territory than this man knows about World Class Championship Wrestling and the Von Erich family. I just don't think that person would exist. If somebody was smart, they would pay Lance to write a book. I don't have the money to do so, or I would get him to do it. But if somebody was smart out there, this man could write a book on the territory and the Von Erichs, and it'd be phenomenal because of all the knowledge he has. But the good news is it's broadcasted via audio all on our Patreon channel at patreon.com/bookingtheterritory. $2 a month can get you all of the World Class shows, over 125 of them that we've done. And we've done a couple of bonus shows as well. Some of them are on the free feed and some of them are on our YouTube channel that I've posted there for free, like I did with this one. So, but all that said, man, this was phenomenal. I'm so glad they made this movie. Not perfect, but still a great watch. Go see it if you haven't already and you're listening to this. Go ahead and see it. I think you'll enjoy it. Just go into it with an open mind, knowing that, hey, there's going to be some things that just aren't, right on the money in terms of timelines and historical accuracy, as I like to say. But follow Lance on Twitter at SMU Heavyweight. You can follow Booking the Territory at BTT_podcast on Twitter. And then we do have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Booking the Territory. Lance, anything else? Anything I missed? Anything you got to say before we get out of here and ride off into the sunset on a wonderful Friday evening?
If anybody wants to get a little taste of it, Mike has on YouTube our review of Texas Stadium 1984, Kerry winning the belt, the Freebird Von Erich with Fritz teaming, the Bad Street match, and Garvin and Sunshine, and that whole feud and stuff. And we have that up there free on YouTube. I'm very proud of that, and I believe that will give you a good taste of what I do on the show here. For the site. I think what kind of information that I'm bringing to the table. Again, we put a lot of effort into this, and I think you'll like it and stuff. I think you'll agree with me. I'm not the only total expert out there, but I really try to put it all together and give it to you. And so I really appreciate, again, everybody listening. Mike, thanks for doing the show.
No, man, this was a pleasure. Great. I actually think this might be one of our longest shows ever because we had a lot to cover with this movie. And the movie, ironically, this show is just a little bit longer than the movie. So there's that. But thanks again. I'm going to get us out of here. Again, we appreciate it. Sign up on Patreon, tinyurl.com/Patreon BTT, or patreon.com/Booking the Territory. Same site. It'll bring you to the same site. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And Lance and I are going to get out of here. We appreciate you. Book it.